15 minutes. And okay. So what I'm basically going to do is I'm going to make reference to a legal framework, a policy framework, especially starting at the global level, the continental level, and that is in Zimbabwe. What I'm then going to do after is to give you sort of maybe the challenges related to the legal framework that governs the participation of youth in elections. Then they want to sort of suggest some recommendations that we may consider in trying to participation and representation. So I'm going to presentation by a quotation from the preamble to the African Charter. Young people represent agents, beneficiaries, and transform that order. Young people in all parts of the world, living in countries at different stages of development and in different socio-economic settings, aspire to full participation in the life of society. So this is the dilemma. Either to be integrated into an existing order or to seek to serve as a force to transform that order. And I would like the youth, those who are within my age group, 15 to 35, as we define the youth in Zimbabwe, to critically think about that statement. The need for participation in elections. Why is it important that the youth participate in elections? A representative political system is one in which all parts of society are included. So if a system is to be deemed representative, politically speaking, it should include or represent all parts of society, including age groups. So when young people franchise or disengage from political processes, that means a significant portion of the population is sidelined. Their views are not going to be taken on board. So what then happens is that in the end, we end up with a system that is not representative. To make a difference, in the longer term, young people should be engaged in the formal political process and have a say in the formulation of today's and tomorrow's politics. But then for young people to significantly contribute, to be represented, they need to be adequately informed of their rights and given the necessary knowledge and capacity to participate in a meaningful way. Youth are underrepresented as voters, they are underrepresented as candidates, they are underrepresented as senior election management board staff members. So an opportunity is missed there for youth to influence decision making and advocate for stronger youth policies. Then some kind of a background. What is the state of maybe youth representation in decision-making bodies, including parliament, across the globe? And also maybe statistics relating to the percentage constituted by the youth of the total population globally. So young people, those who are 15 to 24, they constitute about a fifth of the world's population. But surprisingly, they are underrepresented the most. Those who are between 20 and 44 make up 57% of the world's voting population, but only 26 of the world's MPs. So you see the underrepresentation there. 65% of African 53. So it's people who are 15 to 35, between 15 and 35. Africa is therefore essentially a youthful continent. And projections by the AU would indicate that by 2020, 2 years from now, the average of 75% of the population in Africa will be 20 years. Okay, young people, we know they are the drivers of change and engage in social political movements. But in terms of formal politics, they are still very much underrepresented. Those the world's MPs, according to the Parliament. And if you look, about 30% of the world's civil and laws of Parliament have not aged under 30 years. More than upper houses of Parliament. So I think be under representation of a youth in decision-making bodies. That would suffice for the background. Then in terms of the international frameworks now, we have the Universal Declaration for Human Rights. We have the International Covenant on Civil and Political Rights. They all recognize their rights to participate fully in one's own country's political and electoral process. It's a basic right. That is recognized as a basic right in those frameworks. There is also the World Program of Action for the Youth. It was adopted in 1995. It guides the United Nations Youth Agenda, and it is quite comprehensive. So it covers 15 interrelated fields of action with regards to the participation and representation of youth in governance. And some of these areas, if you look at them, I think there should be incentives for young people to take part in governance, particularly in elections. So issues to do with education, health, employment, they are all part of the 15 fields that we're talking about. HIV and AIDS, etc., etc. So I think those should serve as incentives for young people to join, maybe to participate in elections. So maybe directly relating to elections, there is the recognition of the need for young people to fully and effectively participate in the life of society and in decision making. And I'm sure you would agree that elections are one of the instruments through which that can be achieved. It is, so we have the United Nations, we have the UNDP 2014 to 2017 Youth Strategy, again is one of the frameworks that govern youth participation in electoral processes. So it calls on young generations to become more involved and more committed in the development process. Outcome 2 of the strategy is titled Enhanced Youth Civic Engagement and Participation in Decision-Making and Political Processes and Institutions. The aim is to bolster youth participation through the promotion of inclusive and effective engagement and participation of youth in planning and decision-making processes and platforms at the national, regional, local, and global levels, and to support sustainable development solutions to poverty, inequality, and exclusion. So again, that speaks to the issue of the participation and involvement of the youth. Article 11 of the African Youth Charter, again, that's another, the continental level now. International, then the continental level of the African Charter, African Youth Charter. It highlights the value of increased information and capacity development to ensure that young people with the necessary knowledge and skills to become active citizens, but not only active citizens, but also active leaders in their communities. Again, the issue of youth participation and representation. So every young person, every young have the right to participate in all spheres of life. That's it. From the African Youth Charter, Article 11. And states to take measures to promote the participation, the active participation of society, including granting and other decision bodies in accordance with the prescribed laws of any given country. State parties are also obliged to facilitate and strengthening of platforms for youth participation in decision making at the local, national, regional, and continental levels of governance, and to ensure access to young men and young women to participate in decision making in fulfilling civic duties. So we have quite a number of frameworks that govern the participation of youth or provide for the participation of youth in governance, particularly elections. Therefore, what do we have? Obviously, the supreme law of the land would be the first port of call, the Constitution of Zimbabwe, Section 3. And this is found in the founding values and principles, of our Constitution. Section 3, recognition of the rights of women. Youth and children. So again, you see, they understand. They participate in the social, economic, and other spheres of life, the political sphere of life, elections, a major institution in that regard. Measures in that subsection 1, must be inclusive, non-partisan, and national in character. So that's the Constitution of the political rights. Every Zimbabwean citizen has the right to. So by every Zimbabwean, they including the youth as well. Every Zimbabwean citizen has the right to free, fair, regular elections for any elected public office established in terms of the Constitution or any other law. Make political choices freely. So this relates to maybe how then youth are supposed to be participating in electoral processes. They have the right to make their choices freely, but also they are entitled to those regular, free, fair elections. So the youth also, in terms of their participation, representation, they have the right to form, join, and participate in the activities of a political party or organization of their choice. They are entitled to that as well. The Constitution freely, peacefully, for a political party or a cause, participate in a peaceful political activity or in any other manner in peaceful activities to influence, challenge, or support election. Then, subject to the Constitution of Zimbabwe, over to do so in secret, youth participation in elections. 2, to stand for election for public office, and if elected, to hold such office in Zimbabwe. Hey, you're going to go. Despite, with a few in decision making. At least 21 years of age. For Senate and the President, you would know it's 40. And we have said the bracket is 15 to 35 for the youth. So you can't be a president if you are youth. For local authorities, councillors, again, it's 21, as provided for in our Electoral Act. Now, challenges, maybe deriving from that legal framework that we have in place. What are the challenges in terms of participation? The age requirements to vote or run for office is a challenge in itself. The minimum voting age requirement set for national elections at 18 in most countries disenfranchises most or many young citizens in that particular country. The existing gap in most countries between the minimum voting age and the minimum age for eligibility to run for office. So you may vote in an election, but you have to wait a little longer for you to be elected as a candidate, particularly for the president. Lack of an exclusive election management body, that is ZEC, youth policy and sustainable funding. That is also a challenge. So these are areas we want to take up, consider, maybe as recommendations. Provisions for the youth are often grouped with others, such as disabled, etc. The election management youth. Election management bodies, youth initiatives are mostly tied to voter education. The point he was making earlier to say the issues of voter education, they are critical in terms of enabling or hindering the participation of youth in elections. So you would find that ZEX, in our case, ZEX youth initiatives are mostly voter education initiatives. Yet these initiatives are only strengthened towards elections. Beyond elections, nothing much by way of civic and voter education. Yet these voter education activities, soldiers by politicians. And we are saying here, as long as youth are vulnerable to the political and military exploitation, they will be hindered from fully participating in the electoral process. What has been done in some other countries, I'm not saying this will work in Zimbabwe. We want to consider, particularly the issue of quotas. You have seen what has happened with the issue of quotas for women in parliament. So these are just suggestions, recommendations, which we may need to deliberate further on. Some countries have introduced quotas for youth to increase their participation and representation. Kenya has done that, Kenya, Morocco, Peru, Rwanda, Sri Lanka, Tunisia, Uganda, etc., etc. 3 types of quotas are mainly used today: reserved seats, legal candidates, and voluntary political party quotas. With reserved seats, this guarantees a certain proportion of youth who will be elected. Have a strong impact on youth representation as they are generally embedded in the constitution, and therefore the election management body is obliged to ensure enforcement. Examples include Kenya, 12 members nominated by political parties to represent special interests, including youth. Uganda, 5 seats for people under 30 years of age, one of whom must be a woman. Very good. Rwanda, 2 members of parliament elected by the National Youth Council. That is the reserved quota. Legal candidate quotas. Political parties themselves may be obliged to fill their candidate lists with a minimum number of young people or candidates. Several countries again have adopted this, and the impacts of course vary, and they depend on the position in which the youth are placed, whether they will ultimately be elected or not. They can be effective under the condition that young people are placed in electable positions. Then political party quotas, these are voluntary, unlike the previous two, they are not mandatory. Political parties may opt to introduce voluntary quotas to ensure that they increase the representation of youth in electoral processes and ultimately decision-making bodies. Part of a political party's internal regulations and therefore cannot be enforced by the election management body. They've been used by many political parties. In Cyprus, there is the Movement for Social Democracy, which adopted a 20% quota for candidates under 35 years of age in 2010. The possible remedial measures, what we could do: enforce legally binding youth quotas to ensure that all political parties comply with the law. Embed voluntary quotas for youth in political parties' internal regulations and place young candidates in electable positions. The issue we spoke about earlier, the age limit. There are some countries that have revised the minimum voting age of 18 years so as to increase the participation of youth. In the last 10 years, so this has been ongoing debates. It has been reduced in some countries to 17, in some to 16. In our case, I'm sure if you are 16 years old, you can get a driver's license, is it not? And the argument that these guys have, those who are pushing for reducing the age maybe to something like 16, they are saying if these people at 16 could own property, pay tax, and do all those other things, they should as well be afforded the opportunity to hold those who are elected into power accountable. Ethiopia, Indonesia, Sudan, etc. Legal voting age is 17 for national elections. In Argentina, Australia, Brazil, Cuba, they've lowered to 16 in national elections. Austria, Belgium, DRC, France, Kenya, they've all lowered the required minimum age for candidates. And a number of countries, including Ireland and Kenya, have drafted legislation requiring political parties to use part of their funding to increase the political, deliberately increase the funding for candidates, young candidates, so as to increase their representation. That is the end of my presentation. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you very much. Thank you, Mekai. I don't know if anyone has a question, a comment on the presentation that we were given. On the presentation we got from Mekai. Okay, I'll start, and then I'll come to you. On the issue of, maybe it's just a reflection for me, on the issue of age limits and the issue of quota systems. On age limits, there is the issue, the not too young to run campaign. I think it was done in Nigeria. And it was signed into the bill, was signed into law this year. I think March, April, May, which lowered the age limit for presidency to 35. So I know we've got organizations in this room who have been pushing for this. I understand NAYO as well has been leading the charge on the front of youth organizations. Number one, what are the prospects of that being a success here in Zimbabwe? Where are we now? What do we need to do? That's the first thing. Then the second thing, around the issue of quota systems, I remember having a reflection meeting in Bulawayo, and there were sentiments around the issue of quota systems to say, are those positive? Are they good for us, or are they bad for us? This was a reflection also, this point came as a reflection from our previous experience with the quota system for women here in Zimbabwe, which is still running and coming to an end in 2023. So they say, how do we then benefit as youth? Bearing in mind, so my argument then was, right now, the 9th parliament that we have is only 6 youth MPs. 6. But the percentages that we're getting here in terms of our population on the continent and in the country, and even in terms of as voters, in the voters roll, we only have 6 of us who are in parliament. So the question around that was, should we have a quota system to enhance our presence, in the National Assembly, or should we not? So maybe this is something I'm just throwing in there just for you to reflect on, and maybe someone can respond as we go.
Thank you very much. I have 3-4 reflections, issues, questions that I'm going to pose. Thanks, Rekai, for that presentation. Very brilliant, very inspiring. I'm not youth anymore, but I'm impressed with your articulation. One of the things we need to begin to understand or to interrogate as youth or youths. I'm not one of you, but I'll help you think through some of these things. I've gone to many presentations. The starting point is always models, frameworks that come from the West, top-down, prescriptive, obviously drafted by non-youths. Then if you look at the language, youth will be integrated. That is not somebody. That is not one of you sitting at that table drafting that protocol. So, as we sit and reflect as Zimbabwean youths, whose narratives do we want to perpetuate? Is it our own narratives as Zimbabwean youths, or the narratives coming from those frameworks? Can we build our own narrative as Zimbabwean youths and say, this is our own homegrown, localized narrative that we want to move with into 2023? Because this is the missing link in Zimbabwe, both within the youth even within the old people. Somebody wakes up tomorrow morning and say, we're Vision 2030. Who did you consult? Right? Say my Vision 2030, not this country's Vision 2030. That has been one of our biggest problems in this country. So where are those common ground issues as youth that we can sit and design our own narrative going into 2023? If you read the charter, for instance, it uses the words young person, youth interchangeably. Chamisa is a young person, but he's not youth. So you're put in the same basket with people that are beyond your age grouping. So the issues that speak to you will also be applied to somebody who's 45. Pupuraito Garepi is over 50 years. But it's not a young person in Zanu-PF. And it's fine because this charter says young person, youth, used interchangeably. So some of these things need to be interrogated very carefully and say, if you want to talk about youths, say youths, why would you say young person? What is the definition of a young person? You see? So the interpretation and its implications are very important. Number 3, what is the probability of parties implementing the youth quota in 2023? And therefore, when you leave this space, you then say, okay, as youths, this is what we want to do. What are some of the practical steps that you think you want to undertake going forward? Because many workshops end like this, we sit, we have fun, we talk, and then we go. Period. The last one is very controversial, so you must put on your shock absorbers. I said it in one workshop meeting about 3 weeks ago, and people were not happy with me. I've gone to conferences and workshops. 60-70% of the people during presentations are on their phones. So what is their business being in those workshops? You can't be listening and at the same time focusing on your phone. And I think it's a disservice to the people that they organize. It's also a big disservice to yourself because you committed to be here to contribute to the discourse on youth participation in elections in 2023 or an analysis of it in 2018, and then we come up with issues that we think are important. I think those are some of the things that I think I needed to share. Sorry to end with a controversial note.
Okay, yeah, that's a very controversial one. I was on my phone as well.
I was on my phone, but I was tweeting. Just like the previous contributor, I'm also not a youth anymore, but I've got youth issues at heart. Thanks, Rekai, for the presentation. You spoke about reducing the voting age, like maybe 16, 17. For Zimbabwe, or I think for something like that to happen, it will take very long. But in the meantime, how can we invest in ensuring that when someone gets to 18, they vote? Like 2023 is about 5 years away. Why can't we start engaging with the 13-year-olds just for them to appreciate the importance of that building civic agency in them, just to appreciate the importance of civic participation? Just not something heavy, something start light with them, so that by the time they get to 18, we don't have to struggle to get them to register as voters. It will come naturally to them to go and register to vote. So as youth organizations, just start thinking about investing in those people that we call children. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Probably just to agree or complement what you have just said. We were part of the partners that are implementing the ballot parties project, and we noticed that one of the major problems is the fact that there is a gap between generations. If you look at our parents or our grandfathers, they only came from rural places to come and look for jobs in Harare. That system didn't exist. They believed in populism, whereby they went to war and believed that the leaders that they have now, they have their interests at heart. But when it comes to us now, we have sort of like evolved. We are learning new stuff and we are learning democracy, and we know how we want what we want to have and how we want to have. So the thing now is, if we say we want this, just asking what we want this, we want this, but not being the key person or the key aspect towards attaining that, then it means that there's going to be a gap again. So the fact that we don't know the background that led us to this place that we have now. We know that we have superpowers, we have super parties, we have Zanu-PF, we have MDC, but if we look at their inception, the reason why they are always dominating is because we can't question them and we don't even know the background towards that, how they come to you saying we have gone to war at times, and it's a fact, but the fact that we do not know how they are composed and how we can take part is a challenge, and it makes us feel like we are neglected, or at times we tend to be neglected because of that gap. But if we are able to capacitate or invest more towards capacitation and developing leaders, for instance, when we talk of young people running for MPs, if you capacitate them, you educate them well, and then they influence their communities or they convince everybody in their communities, I don't see the reason why they can't be voted in. So we only have to invest more in the young people, probably from a tender age, like you were saying, so that it grows within them, rather than just asking for stuff without just the playground or where we are.
Put in place to support youth participation in all the spheres. But one thing that we must also, agree to is that the implementation or domestication of some of these frameworks, becomes a challenge. Early this year, I think it was around June, where Zimbabwe was also signatory to the African Charter on Democracy, Elections and Governance, which is ASDEC, which speaks volumes in terms of youth participation in the electoral processes. And also even the United Nations Security Council Resolution 2250, which also supports effective youth participation in electoral processes. But the domestication now of some of these frameworks becomes a challenge to promote youth participation. So I'll give you an example. For the women, we've got the proportional representation. Of course, it lapses in the next election. But for youth, we do not have a specific legal framework that guides young people or youth participation in electoral processes. You only have Section 20. Of course, Section 20 speaks volumes, but you also need another legal framework, for instance, that which also promotes the involvement and the inclusion of women, for example, the proportional representation. So I also believe, for instance, the age requirement, which hinders youth to be presidential or senatorial candidates, because the minimum age is 40, and then you say the Constitution says, Section 20, a youth is anybody who is 15 to 35. So that on its own, hinders young people to be on that particular table. And as young people, we may not necessarily be effective in participation if we are not, being accorded same spaces at the decision-making tables. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. So, I think, do you want to respond to anything?
Those are the ones that are prohibited. If we are going to provide for a quota, let's say maybe 20% in parliament should be used, you wouldn't have done anything to the issue of the challenge of financial resources, for example. The capacitation of maybe the youths themselves to be able to stand on their own and campaign as candidates. And having 20% of youth, as youth in parliament, does not necessarily guarantee that they are going to, may not be deemed to be that mature. Of course, it's debatable, but again, I think it's also an issue that we should seriously consider. Other countries have gone that route, but we should seriously interrogate before we can follow suit. So I think I brought these points out so that we can have a debate around those issues. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much, Rikai. Antoinette has something to say.
Morning, everyone. I'm still a youth at heart and in being. Okay. My comment, I'm going to respond to Rikai. I think for a start, we really do need the quotas. I'm just speaking from the perspective of how the women's quotas have worked in Zimbabwe. For a start, I think we need to be able to push and advocate for youth quotas, especially within the political parties, because they are the gatekeepers, especially when it comes to the submission of the nomination list. So once we have quotas, which are also enforceable I think they may go a long way in improving the participation of youth in elections, both as voters and as elected officials. But just to add on that, there's need for us, youth organization, to advocate for political will within the political parties themselves by being able to engage them in a dialogue, to be able to build their capacity to realize the importance of having youth as both voters and as elected officials. So we need voters, but at the same time we need to push for political will within the political parties themselves, because they are the ones which determines whether you can participate as a candidate or not. Thank you.
So I want to round this off with an unorthodox, rather in an unorthodox way, and ask to say, he gave us a clear presentation in the picture in terms of, the frameworks, the legal frameworks, international charters that we are also party to, and our own constitution, the various sections, as well as issues to do with the Electoral Act, how young people can participate. So my question, and this one will be targeted to two people. The first one will be Tawan. He's my brother, so I'm allowed to partira him. So we have all these things in place. Why do we have 6 young people in parliament? Not young people, sorry, don't. Why do we have 6 youths in parliament? Where is the mismatch? Where is the disconnect there? Why is it, young people are not there? If you remember well, our former president, the first thing he did in terms of his presidential campaign, when he was under the assumption that he would win, was to target young people, youths, right? You remember the presidential interface rally? He went all around the country, I think he was left with only one province. He went all around the country and did this meet the youth interface rally. So this was already for us a reflection to say youths are the ones with the answer in terms of the 2018 election. And we saw all other political parties coming out, civil society coming out. So that's why I'm asking to say, why do we have only 6? 6, half a dozen, out of 210 who were elected and 60 from proportional representation. Why do we only have 6? Tony.
That's a very difficult question, but I don't know if this thing is on.
Yeah.
Yes.
I think part of what I see as the problem is our failure, well, your failure, to convert your massive numbers to political power. I think in all the instances that you've given, there is a clear recognition by those wanting to have power that young people contain the numbers. So they are useful as vehicles to drive them into power. And we have played into that. I mean, look at civil society's approach to young people's participation. The major preoccupation is let's get them out to register to vote. It's always that. How do we get them on the voters roll? How do we get them out to vote? When we talk about other things like representation or actually getting them into office, it's a conversation that happens later. It happens in hindsight. So I think part of the tragedy is the failure for young people to realize their capacity. So I'll give you an example. If you look at the War of Liberation in Zimbabwe, the people that crossed the border to go to war, how old were they? They were kids. I have an uncle who crossed when he was 18 or so. So those people went to war at a very young age because they wanted something. They didn't clamor for policy changes. They didn't say we want this, because nothing is ever given on a silver platter. This is about power. So if you're thinking that you can sit down around the table with people who are contesting for power to say we also want space on the table, I don't think you're going to get it. If you are, it's going to take a long period of time. So I think part of where the disconnect is, the failure by young people to actually realize how much power they have. A lot of the politicians that are holding public office are not afraid of young people in terms of the consequences that may accrue to them if they don't respond to what young people want. We've never punished politicians for anything with our numbers. We evolve or adapt to what these politicians say and do. And whatever we get, it's at their benevolence. In a lot of the cases, it's their benevolence. So do we come up with this? Oh, maybe, maybe not. And then we say thank you. And then the civil society at times actually celebrate to say we've made inroads. But have we really made inroads? So I think there is that huge disconnect. And one of the other things that we were just discussing earlier is that at times we make too many assumptions as well about who a young person is and about what a young person actually wants. What a young person wants in this room may differ fundamentally with what a young person wants in Mutoko North. Whereas we want young people to actually sit in parliament. Have we ever asked ourselves if young people in Mutoko actually want to sit in parliament? And have they all said, yes, that's what they want? So the disconnect comes from making too many assumptions. The disconnect comes from not recognizing how much power we hold. So as much as we want to talk about frameworks, and I'll agree with the doc here, frameworks, systems around doing this, I think that's the whole concept of frameworks is at the tail end of winning this struggle. It's right at the end of it. The real struggle is about starting to influence political power and starting to attach a consequence to having politicians not respond to what young people want. The more politicians realize that if we are not responding to the demands coming from young people, there's a consequence. You'll find that they will become what? They will change their attitude. But it's not because we've written a policy down. It's because we've acted politically. So right from the onset, I think, and we've got 5 years to do this, I think the major emphasis of our interventions must relate to building the political capacity of young people, not to stand for public office, but to understand what their rights are, to use their numbers to influence what happens politically, to attach a consequence to politicians not responding to what they want. I mean, when you talk about the Nigerian case, and I've been privileged to work with colleagues that were running the Leave No Youth Behind campaign, and the whole policy conversations were at the tail end. It was about ensuring that you get into political parties and you're mobilizing young people to understand what their power is and to strategically use that power. Because you may have the numbers, but if you don't know how to strategically use it, it's going to get abused by those that think they can. So I think that you've got the disconnect from the failure to appreciate the power that young people actually have on their own. And secondly, because the preoccupation with overly assuming what must be. So I would close by saying, I think the question of policies is important, but it's, in my view, at the tail end of the real struggle that young people must embrace, which is the struggle of occupying political space, politically, and using that space to then drive what they want. So I'll leave it to you.
Thank you very much, Sohana, for knocking our heads and putting things into perspective for us. So now we are about to get into a session with Natasha from Zimbabwe Young Women Network for Peace. But before we get into that, I had asked the issue on quota systems, just to have an overview of our position and if those things will benefit us. So my question to our board chair would be, will it work for us? Do you think it can work for us. Rekai spoke of qualitative and quantitative representation. Should we be there in our numbers and not say anything because we are focusing on quantity, or should we be there and be able to articulate issues and also influence policy from within, which is the quality aspect? So my question is, do you think it's a model that we should think about and then have the debate, or it has its downsides which will never work for us? Which is which?
Morning to you all. I'm sure it's possible can work to have the quotas. I also noted down to say, for starters, we need it. It's something that will give us enthusiasm and push us to work. Because I'm looking at a scenario whereby he brought in the issue of qualitative and quantitative. Now that we know that maybe we need about 20 people to be in parliament, why not then rope in those 20 and put them under training and mentor them to an extent that when election comes, everyone is convinced they should go. And when they do get into parliament, they've got something to say. They don't just eat or sit and do nothing, but they'll have something to contribute, which is meaningful because they now have the exposure. Maybe our challenge right now is because I think from home and wake up and make sure that I'm in the streets trying to campaign. No one is there to support me as an individual as well. And I don't have that exposure. So the expectations that come by are not even maybe so clear to me. I'm just seeing from the TV and I'm just hearing from the radio and I think, okay, that's it. That's what they're supposed to be doing. So if we make a deliberate move of then grooming and mentoring these individuals, we might even get better results than we expected because we've done something. So this quota will actually push us to work and do something and not just sit back and think that all is going to be well, because these other guys are getting away with it day in and day out because we are not even acting as well. We are not pushing for anything. And like he said that maybe someone in Mtukudzi is not even convinced that they're supposed to be in parliament. So then what? What does it mean? Because he's not convinced, are we saying the other guys should not be? So let's find those that are and work and help them as well to try and reach that goal that we want as yet and also as civil society.
Okay, thank you very much for your response. So we have now a presentation from the Zimbabwe Young Women Network for Peace, which will just reflect on our role as young people in building peaceful communities. I think this is a necessary facet. Peace is a necessary facet in terms of our discussions post-elections. To say, do we as young people have a stake when it comes to peace? Do we have a role to play? So this is what will be taken through, so that we also then come to an end of our breakfast meeting. So thank you.
Morning, ladies and gentlemen. So I'll desist from using young people as was corrected. I'll use youth, okay? So from us, the youth, what do we know about peace? What do we think peace is? What do you think? What's peace? As youth, what's peace? What do you think about peace? Really?
Intolerance, living in harmony, just being itself.
Yes. Are you raising your hand or are you talking me? Okay. Please.
For me, it is living in an environment where I'm able to express myself, where I'm not afraid of the next person or what could possibly happen to me, where my rights.
So as when we define peace as more than the absence of violent conflict, we believe in the respect of every human being, male or female. As young people, it's Ronald Reagan. He said, peace is not just the absence of conflict, it is the ability to handle conflict by peaceful means. We then go on to analyze the 2018 elections. The elections came in with a nation that was predominantly youth, and most of the youths were and are still unemployed, which made them vulnerable to manipulation and coercion. Unlike the experience of past elections, 2008 and 2013, this year's elections were not as violent as we were used to. We had young people contesting as candidates in this election, especially young women stood up as candidates, the likes of Fadzai Mahere, Linda Msarira, Joanna Mamundwe, and the likes, which was something new. There was a lot of electoral and political information available out there. Some of the info was misleading and incorrect, which led to some young people making decisions based on false information, which was circulating especially through social media. Although there was a few cases of violence reported across the country, what was the reality on the ground was that there was latent conflict, and some people were still very much afraid, and in most rural communities, most people were still afraid to attend political rallies of certain parties because of the fear of past elections experiences. However, for youths living in urban areas, we saw them speaking out and opening up through the use of social media, challenging and speaking against political violence, which was commendable. Now on the role of youth in peace building in the community, as we have highlighted before, that made a priority within the education system so that the values of peace are instilled in children from as little as primary level and can be sustained as they grow up. So it is essential that peace is taught even in primary schools at a very tender age. And when we're taught about peace, it becomes easier even when we're talking about the next coming elections. The 13-year-olds, when they reach the voting age, they now know how they're supposed to react in most cases. Young people from the majority of the country's population, and therefore their advantage in numbers makes them the champions of peace. What is then needed is to strengthen youth movements to preach and practice peace. Peaceful environment ensures development, and we believe that development strives where there is peace. Opportunities and economic development also strives where there is peace, and be included in all peace building processes, because they also have solutions to some of the challenges threatening peace in the community. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Natasha. So, I think this presentation was meant to just do two things. The first is to remind us of the role, rather the importance of peace building and the role that we have as youth, that we have to play. Then the second thing is also just to sort of ignite a bit of a discussion around the issue of peace, the issue of peace building. You know, I think there was also mention of you know, female youthful aspiring candidates in the 2018 election, and also the reflection on how they, you know, how they did in terms of their campaigning and the outcome. But I think for me, a key takeaway would be just a brief discussion around the importance and the role of youth in peace building. Why this is important is because traditionally, if you look at the history of our elections here in Zimbabwe, we have taken an active part. Youth have taken an active part, but as perpetrators of violence. Do you agree? Yes. Okay. So for me, that's where we should start from. I think our significance in elections, this is my personal view, has shifted from us just being agents of violence and going out to inflict harm, and to cause mayhem and all those things. And we've now sort of risen to become actual stakeholders in elections. But is that so? That becomes the question. Have we shifted from being that in previous elections to being this, as I'm saying, to say we are now stakeholders? We're stakeholders, unfortunately, we don't have a seat at the table, but we've been recognized as a key pillar in terms of our participation in elections as voters. So our vote has been given value. So my question then to all of us, first just as a discussion, do you think this is the correct notion? Have we moved from being, tools and agents of violence, intimidation, to actual, to become now? What do you think? Okay, I'll start with Chisina.
Thank you very much. Thank you. Good morning, everyone. I may not answer fully, but I would like to acknowledge that it all starts with the environment that we are operating in, or that we are working in. For example, if you are surrounded by violent people, then that's the culture of that particular environment. But I would like to believe that in this particular regime that we are in, there is some level of tolerance towards peace. So with that, it's actually a good environment for young people then to start to embrace peace building initiatives, to start to campaign for peace, to reconciliation. And in terms of the National Peace and Reconciliation Commission, I think they also acknowledge that youth plays a bigger role in terms of peace building. And I would like to just go back a bit to the narrative of youth participation, especially in elections, and just to point out that it requires that young people be part of systems that then build them to become political leaders. There's a provision for young people to become leaders in their own right within the political parties. Just to find out, probably a survey in this particular room, if there are young people who are in the systems of political parties, you will find that we have none or little. So it should not come as a surprise to see 6 youth in parliament, because that's the system that then builds parliamentary representatives. So it's all about the environment. It's all about us being able to then take up the initiatives that puts up us in systems that build us to be able to realize full participation. Even in the quota system, you then bargain for that quota system within that particular political party, because that's where you then start to become a representative. Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
Good morning. I always like to look at something that George Bernard Shaw says when it comes to issues of security, which always also revolve around this. He says in his states, security, the chief pretense of civilization, cannot exist where the worst of dangers, the danger of poverty, hangs over the head of everyone, where the alleged protection of the minority is as a result of an extended existence of a police force whose real business is to force the poor men to actually see his child suffer, while the rich actually feed and clothe pet dogs. with the food and clothes that might feed the poor man's child. Why did I quote this, you might ask? When it comes to this issue that you're talking about in terms of peace, number one, the peace, security, and also peace as it revolves around the issue of elections, it's going to differ, and when you have to look at it, for young people here in Harare and young people outside Harare. For example, in places such as Uzumba, Marangwa, and Fungo. So when I look at the question that you have posed to us to analyze, one thing that always comes to mind is very simple. The issue of peace around elections, there is a part of it that we are not clearly or closely interrogating. We may probably look at the outside and say that we are done with the peace and there is peacefulness, so to speak. But there is a question that we also ought to interrogate on the inside. Do we have the peace security inside? To say the wounds of the past, have they really been cleansed? Or they are still fresh and covered by just scars? And can actually at any time erupt and start to cause also problems with us. So in essence, one thing that I think we ought to also interrogate when you look at the issue of peace is to say the outside has been looked at for quite a long time, but the inside part, the inner core of it, the internal peace, do we have it? Yes, there is probably no violence on the outside, but when it comes to the inside, there is also maybe perceived or thought issues of violence that are within our minds, wherein their existence are actually going to disturb that peace itself when it comes or revolves around the issue of elections. So I think we also have to, in conclusion, interrogate on both sides, the internal and the external.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, on the specific question you asked or you posed to say, have we moved or we have not moved? In my view, we have not moved. We seem to be too self-seeking and too unprincipled for us to seek the larger good for everyone or for all. What I mean is, not only this does it now, it goes beyond the youth. We have a system in place that is designed such that if you are not part of the system, you will suffer outside it. So instead of fighting maybe to change that system, you remember the quotation? Huh? Two options that confront us: to seek to change the order or to be integrated in that order. Most of us, we are seeking to be integrated into that order rather than changing it. We have quite a number of people, quite a number of them. I was talking to one person, some young person in my rural home in Chimanimani. This person was saying to me, don't try to fight a system, you will die fighting a system. What they are fighting for is to join the system rather than to reform for the good of everyone. So I think this is also something that is a major challenge for us, the young people. If you are going to change politics, if you are going to change governance in this country, then the value questions have to be addressed. I think we are too selfish, self-seeking, and principled to do anything meaningful. Thank you.
Thank you. Next to you.
I think I concur very much with my brother who spoke right over there. I think the issue of peace is quite a controversial subject when you want to relate it to the past election. The past election did not have overt violence. The violence was not open. It was criminalized people before. It knows people are afraid of being brutalized. It doesn't happen again. So what it does, it just intimidates. It just reminds you to say that if you don't cooperate, you know what will happen to you. So that was what was happening. I had an opportunity to in quite a number of places during the run-up to the elections, particularly in Mashumo province. There was a lot of intimidation. the violence was not open. You know, that's why it seems like there wasn't that much violence as compared to previous successive elections. But the truth of the matter is that there was covert violence. People were intimidated. People were intimidated. So to really say, I mean, from the previous presentation, to really conclusively say that there was during, I mean, before elections, I think to interrogate and get deeper into, you know, the situation that prevailed prior, during, and also after the elections. Thank you.
Okay. Really interesting.
Okay, so I think the question is that if we move from being just the agents of perpetrating violence, or to then move to becoming actual stakeholders. I think there's a reality that a lot of people are not alluded to, and the reality is, at the past election, young people did not need to fill the role of previous militias, border gazis and stuff. We had a military that was on the ground, it had a presence, and a military that could shoot to kill. A military that had shown its force, full force, by putting tanks on the road a few months ago, which is 12 months before. And when you have that environment, people already know that, you know what, there's no need to fear an ordinary young man who can be arrested, who can actually then go in the streets and perpetrate violence and be made accountable for it. Yet we have people who can perpetrate violence and get away with impunity, as we probably have seen. So I think as we move into the future, we need to look at it and say, are we going to continue to have military presence in our societies, in the urban areas, in the suburbs? Because as long as we have military presence and the military is that still in position where they can do whatever they want with impunity, then young people do not need to then perpetrate violence. So looking at it from the fact that we shifted, I think we have just been disabled. And in place of us came a better tool for intimidation. But have we become actual stakeholders? No. Because you're alluding to the fact that we have 6 young people in parliament, number one. I would ask yourself, the 6, what have they done in parliament to even bring youth issues to the table? We haven't seen that. Have we had a debate or an agenda of even trying to address issues of young people? No. Have you heard the president speaking about young people besides the time he was invited to the party and he only spoke about the young people protecting party interest in defense of the other opposition young people protecting their own party interests? No. So I think we haven't become stakeholders of the country. We have just become, we have taken the lesser role in violence, but our position in terms of affecting policy still remains the same. We are at bay, if not even, we have gone back before. Because there's also the narrative of the ruling party, where the ruling party has been afraid of the G40. G40 has been young people and or perceived people of the age below 40. So they are closely watched, closely monitored within the ruling party. So if the young people of the ruling party are afraid to make moves, what would you think about the young people of opposition parties that are not in government?
Okay. For me, I think when we are looking at problems, we also need to look at the roots, other than just judging the fruit. If you look at our education, for example, from Form 1 to 6, there's nothing about politics. You see languages, you see sciences and everything else except politics. So young people after high school, they're expected to know politics. Where are they going to get the knowledge of politics? So if you are watching TV, for example, you will see politicians 70, 100 years, right? So as young people, they don't see how exactly they are going to fit in a system where they are old people. So I think we really need to visit our education system. Then how are we communicating our ideas to woo or to promote politics so that young people can participate? Is yet as famous as the party Juscat? These are the questions that I'm just asking. Then how do people engage? How do people, young people join? Or where do they get political information? Let's look before, if I think for our next 5 years. Now, where are the young people? They are in the streets, they are in their different communities, they are playing soccer. the only politics that they get to know is probably one or two information. Chamisa has done this, Mnangagwa has done this, but then who is engaging them at that soccer level in the streets? So these are some of the things that I think they somehow discourage young people from participating in politics. We need to build, what can I say, organizations that are known, that young people can engage wherever they are, whether they are in rural areas or wherever they are. So it starts with order from the people that call themselves like organizers, how they like have a vision to incorporate everyone everywhere. I think that's how we are going to promote young people, and that's how we are going to encourage them to join politics.
Okay, very interesting there.
Thank you very much. One of the things that we do a great research to ourselves when we analyze situations is failure to pick out the positives from the negatives. In 2008 and 13, there was overt violence. He said, in 2018, there was covert violence. So there's a plus. There was no violence by the young people. The causalities of no violence, we'll discuss that at some point. But at the starting point, let's acknowledge there was no violence by young people. It's a plus. Yes. Now, how do you build that plus going forward is the next thing that we need to do, right? I listened to the presentation carefully. There was an assertion that youth are champions of peace. So the next thing you ask yourself is, what is that role? What are the pillars that we are going to use to ensure that in 2023, sorry, youths will not use overt violence as they did in 2018, military or no military. If you listen very carefully to Tawanda's intervention, this is a resource for young people, right? Your political traction, you can analyze it anyhow. You can talk about the military, but the moment Chamisa knows the youths are not on his side, you will do something. The moment Mnangagwa knows the youths are on his side, you will do something. So you have political attraction. So pick out the positives from the negatives. I mean, the narrative of Zimbabwe is a very interesting one. If you ask political parties, churches, you almost listen to the same sentence. But these are from different prisms. And the different prisms must give you different nuances and interpretations of situations, right? But what is missing from our own narratives is, what is our role in building our own peace? We go back to the military with the guns and Zanu-PF and beating up everyone. But here we are, we're supposed to shape shape our lives going forward. I would suggest that youth, as I said in the narratives, look at what is our vision for peace in 2023 and work backwards. I think that is very important. You have a huge resource. 60% of the people registered in the 2018 elections were youths. My God. You're like diamonds, you're like minerals. You can do anything. So discuss those pillars, go back to your offices and say, what is the role that we want to play as youths? What are the pillars that we are going to use? Human security, you talk about security, very important. Human security, governance, whatever pillars you think you can work through very carefully. And don't get into people's narratives. I am always a believer of own narratives. Tell your own stories. In 2018, some people were asked that they had reported that there was violence, and then they were asked by the military and said, okay, let's go to those funerals and see who was killed. No one could come forward, right? But if you go to communities, like Tawanda was saying, communities have resources for peace. There are local capacities that you can tap into. Don't come from Harare into your vehicle and go to the village and try and teach people peace. It does not work. Some of us who have lived in this civil society work for many years know that it doesn't work. That's why every election, despite all the intervention, the programs and everything, violence occurs in those communities. Because we have not tapped into their resources, their capacities for peace. And there's always an assumption that peace building is common sense. It is not. It has ceased to be common sense. It's not a field of study. That's why you find universities providing that, those undergrads, masters, PhDs and all that. Invest in that and then build your own internal capacities for peace and for peace building intervention. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Okay, so I'll have to take these last two so that we wrap it up.
So, on the issue of the youth, I have one question. How many times have we been advocating to have youth involvement? And has it worked? And my suggestion now is, why can't we develop young leaders, to invest more in developing the young leaders than to advocate for them? Let's empower them by developing them to be leaders. Have a group of young people who are developed to be leaders. Because I believe in the days of Jangirai, that's what was done. Young people were developed to lead. And right now we are just advocating for these young people, but we are not developing them to become the leaders we want. Thank you.
It turns out mine is going to be more of a supporting one. But like he has just said, I think, like you asked the question, have we moved, Miles? I think we have moved. And we all know the background to all these issues. We all know these issues. We have done the researches, everything is on par. But if you look at the election, the previous election itself, young people were mobilized in our masses to vote for people and vote for parties. But do we even compose anything, or do we even have an input towards those parties? It was just us being followers. So in other terms, it's like we are being used for other things, but we are not developed to be leaders. So I think as much with all this information that we've gathered over the years, we have university students, we've done the research, we all know the background. If I am to say, let's write in backgrounds here, we write intimidation, we write lack of knowledge, ignorance, fear of victimization, all those things. But what we are saying now is, let's go back to the grassroots and develop leaders whom we know can lead. If we are given these sports, for instance, we are given the sports to advocate, or we have advocated and we are given these sports, but we don't have leaders, then to what end? Tomorrow are we going to cry again saying that our youth are not variable, and then we kill that sport again? So we are saying, rather than just going and crying, let's go with something tangible. The Clerk of Parliament recently said, come with something that is tangible, something that is specific, and go develop something that you know you can attain as young people. So we are saying that let's invest more. This is the period that we have. We have entered another election period right now, and we are in the pre-phase. So let's have young people who can be councillors in the next election, young people who can be MPs. Let's invest towards developing leaders. Thank you.
Thank you very much. So I think it's been a very interesting discussion. And I think the most recurring recommendation in terms of our deliberations has been the issue of us being more serious about this. If we are talking of the role of young people, we need to invest in young people. We need to identify and build their capacities, as Mr. Mandu just came from saying. We need to also have a presence in the communities, as my brother was saying, Dr. Marige. So it's an interesting discussion that we're having in terms of how our election went and where young people were found. But I'm happy that no one spoke of young people throwing rocks, which would have been, I've been to a lot of post-election reflections, and that would be the number one point, because like I said earlier on, we used to really be at the forefront of, or on the wrong side of participation in elections. So at least we, according to me, we would have sort of moved away from our previous misdoings. So with that being said, I would like to thank you for attending today's breakfast meeting, which was more of a reflection of our experiences in terms of the 2018 election and probably what needs to be done in terms of peace building. I'd also like to thank in absentia Rekai, who shared with us, issues to do with the legal frameworks that provide for our participation as youth. So thank you very much and enjoy the rest of your day. Goodbye.